This episode is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. You know that one friend who always finds the best travel deals, picks the right cards, and somehow ends up in first class for the price of coach? How do they do that? Well, Smart Travel is like that friend, but in podcast form. They cover all things travel finance, like which travel cards earn their keep and which are just heavy, shiny metal, and planning group trips that won't ruin your budget or your friendships. So travel smarter and spend less. That's the key with help from NerdWallet. Follow Smart Travel wherever you get your podcasts. Armchair-Explorer is a part of the Voyescape podcast network. Check out all of their shows from around the world at voyescape.com. Hey guys, welcome to Armchair Explorer. My name's Aaron Miller. I'm a travel writer and your host. And today we're going to be sharing an episode from our friends over at Red Bull. Yes, Red Bull people. How awesome is that? I'm super proud to be working with their audio team over there. They make awesome content. And this episode is from one of their shows called How to Be Superhuman. If you haven't checked that out, guess what? Red Bull know how to be superhuman. If anyone does, it's them. It's produced in a kind of similar way to our signature adventure episodes. So really focused on that narrative storytelling, documentary style, lots of music and sound design. And it's all about understanding what it means to push the limits of human potential. All sorts of cool stories, from conquering terrifying climbs, swimming the longest rivers, loads and loads of cool stuff. They're basically stories about people who have dared to step outside their comfort zone and do things that most of us would think are impossible. But here's the thing, they're not. The host of the show is a guy called Rob Pope, and if you haven't checked out our episode with him, scroll back and do that. It's called Becoming Forrest. He's an ultra runner who recreated exactly Forrest Gump's run that he did in the film 5 times across the US, 15,600 miles, 422 days, and 2, of course, boxes of chocolates. So he's kind of a superhuman himself in many ways. But for Rob, what he's really trying to inspire in people with the podcast is that we can all be superhuman. We can all push our limits. We can't all run across America 5 times, to be fair, but we can find our own superpowers. And I think this show really inspires you to do that. So highly recommend it. It's called How to Be Superhuman, and you can get it wherever you get your podcast. So go and check that out. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Rob now and an adventure paraglider called Tom de Dorlodot, who became the first person ever to soar across 4 8,000 meter peaks. That's more than 26,000 feet, just shy of Everest, in a single day. Are you ready? Yeah, me too. Let's go.
Tom de Dorlodot is flying through the Himalayas.
So I was going up like a bullet, like a rocket, super fast.
He was like a bird with a huge wingspan, soaring over 7,000 meters above the ground.
And then all of a sudden I start feeling that my hands were tickling, I feel something was wrong. I couldn't feel my legs anymore.
Blackness was closing all around him. His vision was going.
I was almost blind, trying to talk, but I couldn't even speak. I couldn't even say a word. I was like, blah, blah, blah. Bubbling. That was really weird.
I'm Rob Pope, and from Red Bull, this is How to Be Superhuman. Today we're hearing from Tom de Dorlodot, who, together with his flying partner, Horacio Lorenz, became the first people ever to fly past 4 8,000 meter peaks in the Himalayas in a single day. I know what you're thinking. How? Well, Tom doesn't conquer these peaks like our regular superhuman climbers. He actually flies. With a parachute-like contraption, he soars at altitudes of 7,000 metres in an extreme sport known as paragliding. He's in the sky for hours at a time. Tom is basically a human bird. But it's his obsession with the mountains of Pakistan that really sticks out. In particular, one mountain, K2, Everest's savage, not-so-little brother. Standing at 8,611 metres, it had never been reached on a paraglider before. That is, until Tom came along. It's a far cry from where he grew up though, in the flat country of Belgium, which made paragliding impossible. Well, nearly impossible.
When I was 14 years old, I went to a boarding school in south of Belgium, and a friend of mine came with an old paraglider at school.
It was basically a tatty old sail.
It really looked like shit, but it was working, and we played on the rugby field with it. We were inflating the glider, and all of a sudden, I don't know, I kind of took off just for 1 or 2 meters. I was kind of flying in a small gust, and I thought, whoa, this is very special. I fell in love with it.
That feeling of being lifted off the ground, fueled by the wind, it was addictive for Tom. He was hooked. He wanted to feel that again, and luckily there was a paramotor school just nearby. Now, I know what you're thinking. Aren't paragliders meant to just take off from the top of mountains? But in Belgium, paramotors are essential because the country is flat. There aren't any mountains around to help with altitude. The motor on the back of the seat allows the pilot to take off from a flat stretch of land. But Tom was just a teenager at this point. He didn't know what he was doing, and he didn't have any money to pay for lessons.
The guy at the paramotor school said, hey, if you help me here a little bit, then maybe I can pay you with flying minutes, So I would spend my weekends there helping out, preparing the machines and stuff. And then on Sunday evening, I would get 5-10 minutes flights. And this is how I started.
Just a couple of years later, when Tom was around 16, he was already so good, he'd started his own company, rented a paramotor, flying up high above people's houses and taking aerial photos.
I would go from door to door and try to sell the photos, It was a good business. It was before the drones and stuff.
With the money from this business, he was able to pour funds into new equipment and travel to competitions.
I was performing, doing new tricks, and slowly but surely, I started my professional career like that.
After attending university in Brussels, Tom moved down to Spain when he was 22 years old and spent time becoming embedded with some of the best paragliders in the world. He had now fully moved on from the world of paramotors. He was purely flying on his own skill and ability to navigate the conditions in the sky. Tom was also really good with a camera, and these pros liked having him around, shooting videos for them. Tom learned everything he could from these guys, and eventually in 2008, he decided to go on his own adventure. He wanted to be the first person to paraglide from the top of Machu Picchu.
Obviously, my dream was to fly from the top, but I rapidly, heard stories and tried to talk to the locals and stuff, and they told me, no, this is forbidden.
Machu Picchu is an awe-inspiring ancient stone city that rises high above the surrounding Andes Mountains. These towering peaks seem to scrape the sky, their summits covered in a lush blanket of green. The whole place is alive with history, the air thin and cool, often swirling with mists that drape the stone structures in an ethereal veil. It's perched at an altitude of 2,500 metres, providing breathtaking views of the verdant valleys and the winding Urubamba River below, which snakes its way through the canyon like a ribbon of silver. And Tom was desperate to experience those views from the air, to float down into them using his paraglider. But as he said, it was forbidden. He wouldn't even be able to enter the site with a backpack.
So I was like, okay, well, I need to bring my paraglider up there. I have to find a way. So I went to the entrance to the office of the director, and I talked to him and I said, hey, I'm studying photography. I would need to go with my backpack because I have my cameras. Would that be okay to make maybe a special, authorization or something?
Tom arrived at the entrance to Machu Picchu and showed security this special bit of paper he'd been given. He told them that the director of the park had given him authorization for the backpack.
So I went there, went to the top, found a nice little place and took off. And I thought, okay, I'm going to land far away. It's not going to be a problem.
He lands in a dry riverbed in a small village nearby, but still far away from Machu Picchu. He thinks he's a safe distance from the authorities anyway.
I pack my things and I'm like, okay, no, I'm out of here. And I hear some dogs, and it really like in the movies, rah, 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 rah. And as I'm crossing the river to go back to the road, the dogs arrive and the locals arrive. They had machetes, they're like, okay.
They grabbed Tom and took him to the police station, where he stayed in jail for half a day.
I kind of tried to play innocent, but at the same time, I knew that at some stage, the director of the park would hear about this and would recognize me, So I had to act fast.
He told the police that he had a photo of the guy who had helped him get the backpack up Machu Picchu, but he had to go back to his hotel and get his camera.
And for whatever reason, they believed it was true, So basically, I escaped, I left the place, took my paraglider out there. I said, okay, I'll be back in 10 minutes with the photo of this guy. And I jumped on my motorbike and escaped.
A few weeks later, Tom was at home in Belgium and he got a letter from the embassy in Peru saying, "Don't come back for another 4 years." But that didn't stop Tom, because in some ways this trip to Machu Picchu was the start of his adventure. He had got the bug, and his Machu Picchu flight had made waves. He started travelling all over the world, but there was one country that truly gripped his imagination: Pakistan.
This is just the highest concentration of big mountains in the world. You have the highest concentration of 7,000 meters, 8,000 meters in the world. It's massive, it's huge.
The Himalayas are just a sea of huge snow-capped peaks, and they were relatively unexplored in the paragliding world. But Tom was determined he was going to be the one to conquer these giants, because there's this thing about flying at altitude. The higher you are, the further you can go.
How the paraglider works is that we take off at, let's say, 4,000 meters, and then we use lifts, thermals, as we call it. They are columns of air that go up, and they can go up to 7,000, 8,000 meters, but they are invisible. Like you just have to, it's a mind game. You have to see it with your mind.
The whole game was being able to catch these thermals. And so in 2013, Tom went to Pakistan with a crew to see how high he could go. They would take off, and the thermals would just start taking them upwards, up and up, almost to 7,000 meters. Just 1,000 meters below the summit of Everest, the kind of altitude where the air is so thin, they needed special oxygen tanks in order to survive.
One day, we looked at the sky and we're like, oh, it doesn't look so good today, so we didn't take the oxygen.
They didn't think they'd be reaching super high altitudes that day anyway, because of the conditions.
And I take off, I'm at 3,500 meters, and 11 minutes later, I know it because I looked at the GPS track, I'm at 6,700 meters. So I was going up like a bullet, like a rocket, super fast.
He was rising 10 meters per second. He thought he would reach 7,000 meters for the first time. This was a huge goal for Tom, and so he's happy.
This is incredible. I was so glad, so happy, and celebrating already. And then all of a sudden, I start feeling that my hands were tickling, like I feel something was wrong. I couldn't feel my legs anymore.
He couldn't feel his hands either. His arms were kind of falling asleep.
And then all of a sudden, I couldn't see anything. I was almost blind. It's a little bit like when you wake up in the morning and you stand up really fast, like the pressure goes down and then you kind of black out. And I tried to talk on the radio to say that I felt weird, And so I was like trying to talk, but I couldn't even speak. I couldn't even say a word. I was like, blah, 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 mumbling. That was really weird.
Tom was hurtling through the air at this point. Jagged peaks surrounding him, glaciers and crevasses down below, 7,000 meters high, and he was actually blacking out. His friend, who was also paragliding, heard him on the radio and understood how serious this was. If Tom couldn't get to a lower altitude, he would most likely die. He started giving Tom instructions.
He said, hey, put your weight on the left, as I start laying on the left side of my harness. Pull on the right side, things like that. And he basically guided me in between those massive peaks, and saved my life.
As Tom got lower and lower, he started to come back to reality.
If I had lost it, really totally blackout, I wouldn't be here to tell the story.
This experience didn't deter Tom though. He was falling in love with this place. Pakistan, the Himalayas, this playground in the sky.
The sky gets really dark because you're really high. The air is so pure. There's no dust or nothing up there, so you can see so far away. Really, like when I was flying at those altitude, I had some tears, and they were freezing on my cheeks, and I was like crying because it's just so beautiful,
Tom continued visiting the Himalayas in Pakistan during the years that followed 2013. He was building relationships there, getting to know the terrain and the weather patterns, becoming an expert at high altitude paragliding. But there was one mountain that eluded him, K2. The second highest mountain on Earth. Nobody had ever reached it by paraglider before. When you look at a picture, it stands alone in the range, unique in its prominence, a huge imposing pyramid, almost a childlike sketch in its construction. But there's nothing childlike about this peak. To actually fly there and try to summit it, not using a motor, just a parachute, his skills and Mother Nature's fuel, thermals, incredible. Tom wanted to be the first. So in April 2022, almost 10 years after his first trip to the Himalayas, Tom and his friend Horacio Lorenz made the journey to Pakistan with the aim of becoming the first people ever to reach K2. But something stood in their way. This huge stretch of land, the Baltoro Glacier.
And this is the longest glacier on Earth after the poles. So it's a 100-kilometer glacier.
It would take hours. And the thing was, during that time, they wouldn't actually be able to land.
If you would have to land there with a paraglider, you would arrive at 40, 50 kilometers per hour. For sure, you break your back, There's no way you're going to save yourself if you have to land in there.
It's a minefield of little mountains, jagged rocks, ice, huge random crevasses that they could easily disappear down and never be seen again. Landing there was just not an option. They would have to stay in the air for nearly 8 hours.
But if in the middle of this, for whatever reason, the clouds get too dark or the wind switches, then there's no thermal anymore and you're just flying down, and then you have to find a landing in a place where there's no landing and you have to try to save your legs.
After 4 or 5 days acclimatizing, Tom and Horacio realized they had enough wind to make an attempt. It was perfect weather.
So a typical day is like this. You wake up in the morning, get breakfast, and start walking before it's too hot, because it's extremely hot down there in the valley,
So they take off through some bushes, high up on a cliff.
We set everything, the oxygen, the cameras, when everything is good, we say, okay, let's go.
They started to fly over the Baltoro Glacier, side by side, Tom and Horacio. They're incredibly nervous. If they fly too low, they're screwed. They need to stay focused.
We can speak, we were just so close to each other.
They're thousands of meters in the air. They can see the glacier below. Mountains to their left and right, like a huge icy runway. A runway they can't land on. Tom's anxious about whether they'll actually make it across. But then something incredible happens. They catch a thermal and they start climbing, flying above this sea of ice. And they look to their side and there's an eagle. An actual eagle starts flying alongside them. And it's even using the same technique as them to stay airborne.
Like the eagle basically showed us where the terminal was, where to go. He guided us.
Tom was basically at one with this magnificent bird, soaring through the air. Surrounded by snow-capped peaks, huge dramatic ice-filled valleys below.
And then we went up to 7,000 meters, and then he flew towards China.
The eagle was the best omen they could have hoped for. Conditions were perfect.
So we have a saying in Spanish, it's somos pájaros, it means we are birds, this is something we say when we are in a moment, like in an exceptional moment, so we were like, somos pájaros, yeah, celebrating because we knew we were going to do it.
And finally, after 4 hours of non-stop flying, Tom and Horacio arrived at K2. This huge, imposing mountain was just there in front of them. They had done it.
When you arrive on K2 after this long crossing above the glacier, you're pretty low and you have this massive, massive wall that is kind of on you, it feels, I still get goosebumps, just thinking about it, because I remember looking up, and seeing this massive wall going thousands of meters above me.
They were the first ever paragliders to fly to K2. They now wanted to go further, to see if they could actually fly over it. Tom was soaring up over the wall, going higher and higher.
And we thought it will never end. We went up from 6,500 to 7,500 meters. We were screaming, celebrating, and we knew we had done something very special. We knew we were the first one to fly those faces on these mountains, so it really felt super special, and we felt very privileged to be the first one to be kind of accepted in that area and flying this place.
But when they got up to 7,500 meters, the wind died. They just couldn't get any higher. They decided to turn around and head back to camp. They were over the moon because they'd made it all the way to K2, but they hadn't managed to summit. They set off again a few days later, but just as they'd made it over the glacier, they got this call on their radio.
A friend of mine from Pakistan contacted me and he was calling on the radio, so I answered and he said, "Tom, there's been an accident."
Someone had fallen from the top of another mountain nearby, Broad Peak. They were searching for him.
I could hear, from the tone of his voice, I knew it was serious. So I said, yeah, we're going to go to Broad Peak. We're going to look for him. Because if we can localize him, maybe we can help, So we flew towards Broad Peak, and it took us an hour and a half to get to the right altitude above Camp 3. And we started searching.
Tom spotted something below. It was a backpack.
A red backpack, I would remember that forever, because I saw the backpack and then I looked at the snow, the trace in the snow, and looked up.
Tom and Horacio started to fly towards him.
Horacio and I, just flying next to each other and flying towards what, happened to be the body of Gordon Anderson. He was basically, he fell for maybe 800 meters, and he fell to his death.
They were able to fly just a few meters above him.
He was face down in the snow. Yeah, birds were flying around already, it was really sad to see. And then I had to announce to his friends on the radio, "Hey guys, we found him. We're sorry to say that he's gone. He's not going to come back from this one." I couldn't stop on thinking about his family, they didn't know yet. They would probably hear the news in the evening, and it was terrible.
This was a stark reminder for Tom of the dangers of inhabiting this beautiful but inhospitable place. They headed back to base camp. The season was drawing towards a close and the weather was becoming more unpredictable. Pretty soon, it turned.
For 2 weeks, it was raining and snowing and extreme winds.
They decided to get out of there and regroup. They wanted to give themselves every opportunity to get to the top of K2. They rested a few days, got some food, recharged their batteries both literally and emotionally, and they made the hike back to their base camp on the edge of the glacier.
We arrive at base camp and we know we have a super small window, maybe 1 or 2 days of good weather. So we know this is it. This is the last chance.
They woke up in the morning and it looked like the perfect day.
We start thinking about the flight. And what I like to do also is to kind of get into the zone, of just thinking about how it could be, and try to basically think about the perfect day, how would that look, the perfect day, the perfect takeoff, perfect flight, get to K2. And I'm trying to imagine it, in my head. And then we take off and we directly see that the conditions are great. There's almost no wind in high altitude, which is a bit sad because we need a bit of wind to climb really high. But at the same time, it allows us to fly anywhere without turbulences.
They make it to K2, but they weren't able to get high enough to summit, though it was hard to be disappointed in this incredible place. Whilst they soared effortlessly through the air, they decided to follow their heart and explore the other mountains that surrounded them. They'd been so fixated on K2, they suddenly realised that many of these other peaks had never been seen from a paraglider before.
Mustak Tower is like a mini K2. It's a beautiful pyramid, very aggressive mountain, and standing just alone up there, and we soar all the way to the summit of the Mustak Tower.
But they didn't stop. They just kept going on to Broad Peak, where they discovered the body previously.
And soared on Broad Peak. We fought away for like an hour and a half trying to go high. We went to 7,400 meters. And then from there, we're like, okay, now what? And we said, okay, well, let's keep exploring. So we went to the Gasherbrum. I think it was Gasherbrum 4 and then Gasherbrum 5. So it was crazy because all of a sudden you realize, well, this is already the third 8,000 meter peak of the day, and we're soaring on it again. So we took a lot of images, videos and photos, and we went for a fourth one. And then we said, now it's time to go home, it's time to fly back. So yeah, it was for sure 100% like probably one of the highlights of my flying career. Yeah.
Like, you completed your new goal and you called it the Grand Slam, which I think is absolutely brilliant. The big four, so to speak. How much did that sort of soothe the pain of not getting the altitude record, or was there any pain for the altitude record? Or you just, you seem a pretty chilled out dude, man, as if you just go, it is what it is.
Yeah, you know what? I think the first goal, and that's how we started this project, was to reach K2, really. But then when we were preparing, we were like, well, actually, reaching K2 might be possible. And it might even be possible to reach the top of K2. It's always the same. You start dreaming big, and if you dream big, it's sometimes not going to happen. And I remember talking to Red Bull about it, and they said, what is the chance that you guys do it? And I say, well, 20% maybe that we fly above K2. And then they say, then we have to go for it. So it's like, this is exactly the mindset that we love it, because you have to dream big. We knew it was going to be difficult, but we also knew that we could make it if the weather was there. It would be 10 kilometer per hour winds more, and we would have made it to the summit, because the hardest part is really to get on that face. But as soon as you're soaring up, because the wind basically hits the face and then goes up, you're in there. If the wind is strong enough, you go to the top, So we were that close. And of course, obviously, we were frustrated because we thought, well, we had a chance to do it, and we thought that we deserved it, But you know what? Those mountains, they're still there. They're still there. And big teams of, really talented pilots, they've been there, tried it, and they didn't reach K2 yet. We're still the only one to reach K2 flying. This summer, I have 2 friends that actually climbed K2 and flew from the top, which is different, with a tiny glider. But that's already really something cool, And I saw in the footage and images, I recognized the mountain and stuff. But then, yeah, flying the Grand Slam was something special. And we knew when we landed that we had done something special. And just between you and I, like we are now thinking about what we called Palma de Oro, the hand of gold, which is 5 8,000 meter peaks in one day. Or in 2 days, that would mean to start at Nanga Parbat, 200 kilometers away, fly all the way from Nanga Parbat to the Baltoro Glacier, and then to the 4 8,000 meter peaks in the Baltoro Glacier. That's another goal, something new that should be or could be explored. So, the mountains, they're still there. It will be done. Someone will fly above the summit. I'm even pretty sure that someone will soon or later land on top of Broad Peak. Things like that will happen, and that's going to be super exciting.
How do you go from the flatlands of Belgium to the top of the world? Determination, guts, and a dream to soar like an eagle. That's pretty superhuman in my book. If you want more from Tom's story, you can watch his documentary, Flying Between Giants, all about his trip to K2 on Red Bull TV. There's a link in the show notes, and trust me, it's pretty epic. Also, if you have any comments or you want to share one of your own superhuman adventures, message us at superhuman@redbull.com. And if they're really good, we might invite you as a guest on a future episode. And remember to follow the podcast, rate it, and leave a 5-star review because it helps other people discover the show. We appreciate it when you share the love. Finally, head to instagram.com/redbulladventure for more superhuman content. Next time on How to Be Superhuman.
I ate like this chicken dinner from Denny's, and I think it was bad. Then I'm throwing up all day, and I was like seeing sideways. I was like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this day? This is really, really grim.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Tom. Amazing story. The podcast is called How to Be Superhuman, and there's loads and loads of amazing stories like that on there. So check it out. Subscribe to it now. How to Be Superhuman. The link is in the show notes. And check out our episode with Rob too. Scroll back in the feed. It's called Becoming Forest. It's a lot of fun. I hope you like it. So until next time, maybe I'll see you on Instagram at armchair-explorer podcast. I hope so. But whatever you do, remember, the more that we look for wonder in the world, the more the wonder of the world becomes a part of who we are. Dare to be truly alive. Armchair Explorer is produced by Armchair Productions, the audio experts for the travel industry. My name's Aaron Miller. I present the show and write it, and Charles Tyree does the audio editing and sound design. I'll see you next time.
Quick question. Do you want travel tips from people who have actually been there?
Our show is co-hosted by Tim Johnson, an award-winning travel journalist who's been to more than 145 countries around the world. And I'm David Brody, the other co-host who's been travel podcasting for 20 years while traveling to 50-plus countries around the world.
In about 10 or 20 minutes per show, we break down a destination with the kind of insight you usually only get from long guidebooks or hours of research.
So if you want expert advice, zero fluff, and travel inspiration that you can actually use, search for Travel in 10 wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can also find us at voyescape.com.
Hi, I'm Pauline Fromer, host of the Fromer's Travel Podcast. We post new episodes weekly, detailing the kinds of money-saving tips and cultural insights that will make your trips richer without making you significantly poorer. We do so by interviewing real travel experts like TV host Samantha Brown, Fromer's authors from around the globe, and such public figures as Free Solo's Alex Honnold. It's a fun travel party. I hope you can join us.